Well, Oregon football has got several returners going into 2023, and the guys who will be the most improved primarily come on the defensive side of the ball. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch this show. Big shout out to all of you who have done so. Big shout out to my man, Rian Winter, for coming back on the pod. He's Sports Chat 503 on YouTube and on Twitter. He is the photo getter extraordinaire. Just go through his Twitter feed. He's got selfies with Phil. He's got him with Dan Lanning. He's got him. I mean, just like go down the list. He gets them all. We love having him here on the pod. Ryan, my man, how we doing?
Fantastic. Let's do this thing, man.
Let's
I love this.
do it. So I've got two of the three. This question came in from Nick, by the way. You can always be a part of the mailbag, YouTube comments, Twitter, at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. Nick asks, so we kind of live in the hypothetical and prediction realm this time of year. Indeed, we do. Just for fun. Fast forwarding to the end of the season, which three players, either side of the ball, he said any, but I think it's either, unless we're looking at special teams. I suppose he could have gone with Camden Lewis. Any side of the ball will be the most improved and why. I will start, and I'm looking at what guys did in 2022 to what I think they will be in 2023 by the time the season comes to a close. I got two of these players on the defensive side of the ball, and I've got one on the offensive line. I'll start my number one guy who I think will be most improved from last year, Ryan. I am buying Trikweze Bridges stock. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think he, on a steady climb last year, on an island, a lot of people maybe took kind of advantage of him early, and he kind of stopped that later on. I thought he played great in the Holiday Bowl. Super smart guy, very funny, really great teammate, guy who people love to be around. I think that's just as much what you bring to the table in game situations on the defense, especially the secondary. He just got his it factor. So yeah, I'm totally with that. Completely love that. I love that pick.
Yeah, my reasoning with Trikweze is that he's in line to probably get a lot of playing time, which you have to have because you're not going to get better if you don't have an opportunity. Last year, from the start of the season to the end of the year, he showed a lot of growth. His position coach is still there. Demetrius Martin, of course, Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy are both there on the defensive side of the ball as well. So he's got coaching continuity. He improved over the course of last season, meaning something kind of gelled with the scheme and the coaches. And now he's got a full offseason with them, in spring football right now. And I also just look at, the potential that he does have, right? 6'3", good athlete. I think he's a good tackler. Where he needs to improve the most is in man-to-man coverage. And I just saw so much growth there. And here's the other thing, Ryan. The Ducks are going to need him to step up because you don't have Gonzo. I don't really know what to expect from PG Jackson for the defensive backs group, who I'm going to talk about later this week. And I think that you look at a guy like Trikweze and say, he's the most experienced and productive corner Oregon's got right now and might need to be the number one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of guys in that room. I like Dante Mann. I think he's going to have a good year this year as well. I think there's other guys who are going to step up. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he key player at a key position for this defense, especially. This defense has to get better in protecting those edges, and they were just getting burned so badly early in the year, and he was one of those guys that was getting burned. So, so I do like that. I do like that pick, and I also just like that side of the defense. I think that the back end of the defense tends to get exposed a little bit, and when they're playing very well, then they get recognition. But other than that, they have to pretty much play a perfect game. And so it's pretty tough out there. That's what I said. They're on an island,
Yeah, and I think that he could be helped as well by a superior pass rush compared to what we saw last year, which helps corners a lot. So who's your number one? Who do you think could be most improved from last year?
Well, I'll stay with the defense. I like the line first. I think Casey Rogers is the guy. I think he takes a next step forward, transitioned in here last year, gets an opportunity to come back another year. I love the idea of another year with the weights, another year with the community, another year with the meal plan. He's got the girlfriend. He'll probably lock that down and get married. He's just a guy who's very established. And I feel like these guys are the guys who can really set their mind to football, and they get a real jump that last run at it. Obviously barring injury and everything else going into the season, hopefully this guy's going to have a really good opportunity. Same kind of a situation. Probably going to have a lot of playing time. Had a good year last year. Got better as the year went on. And one of the guys who did put pressure, it felt like, on the quarterback from the defensive line position. So hopefully we'll see a little more of that.
Yeah, and he's someone who I think can improve the most against the pass compared to what he did against the run. You think about his impact plays from a year ago. He made a couple in the Utah game. He had some other disruptive moments. I think he was really solid against the run. But if he can, develop a stronger array of pass rush moves, I think he could turn into an even better player than what he is right now. I like that pick. I hadn't really thought about him there. And I definitely did not consider Dorless because I just don't think Dorless has that much further to go to hit his ceiling.
Right. That's a good
can he
point.
improve? Yes, but is there a long way to go? Big jump? Not really.
Well, I think what they were doing with Dorless last year is kind of what they were a little bit doing with Kayvon. They were dropping him in coverage sometimes. They were doing some other kind of weird stuff, just creative stuff with him. And I didn't know if that was necessarily right. I like his hand in the dirt. I like him getting after the quarterback and
like
getting after offensive linemen and just creating edges and creating angles. And I think that's what he's best at. Doesn't mean he can't be a rangy player in space, but because he's a hell of an athlete. But I do think that he's best suited with hand in the dirt, one focus, get out to the quarterback, do your job.
Yeah, I agree. And I like him on the interior more than on the edge because he's got such great hands and his pass rush moves. He can win one-on-one matchups on the edge, but he doesn't have a speed rush, right? You think about Kayvon Thibodeau, he first came to Oregon. His only move was that speed rush around the edge. But if you're going to be an effective pass rusher the way we hope Mateo Uyunglele will be, you have to be able to do that. And that's just not Dorless's body type. And I think adding Jordan Burch, putting him out there kind of allows them to slide Dorless back on the interior. And he'll join a pretty loaded, from a depth standpoint, group of defensive tackles when you put Popo in the mix.
Yeah, and that's why you just talked about, it's a great segue to talk about Popo because we were just talking about this. He's a guy coming off injury, a lot to prove this year, going to be a great addition to this team. Already was a great addition to this team before he went down, and a key run stopper. Can he advance the game to the next level by getting that pass rush, by getting some other sort of moves, and maybe being a little bit more flexible in the middle? I think the time will tell on that one.
Yeah, I think you have to, give some guys time, right? Don't make judgments after the first game. Don't make judgments even after the second game all the time. Like there's going to be, though, we would like guys to play at a pretty high level in that second game because that's not going to be an easy one down at Lubbock. But Ryan and I have each got two more guys who could be big improvement players. I got one offense, I got one defense, and I got one sports book that you need to check out, and that's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. There's no better place to get in on MLB action than FanDuel. Right now, new customers can step up to the plate, get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. They've got a bunch of other stuff on there as well. If you like betting golf, highly recommend. I'm sure my man Ryan would as well. I know he was watching the Masters. I was watching the Masters. Rombo getting it done, snatching it from Brooksy. I loved every single second of it. But I love that you can go to FanDuel and not miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's keep it rolling, Ryan. Next guy, I'll go to the offensive side of the ball here, who could make, the biggest improvement by the time the season comes to an end, right? Not by the time we get to conference play, but by the time the season comes to an end. I'm going Josh Conerly here on the offensive side of the ball. Again, a guy who Oregon might need to step up, who thrived, I think, pretty well in his role in the 14J package last year, but now he's going to be asked if he's the starting left tackle, and I think he should be, to take that next step and not just be a guy who's in there to run block. You got to be able to pass block. You got to be able to understand calls. You have so many more responsibilities protecting Bo Nix's blindside there. But the early returns were so good because remember, he went into that 14J package as a true freshman, and he surpassed some, a bevy of 4-star offensive linemen who would love to get in the game as well. But Conerly's got that sort of talent. He's got a new offensive line coach. I think that's a fair question to ask about him, whether or not he can do it. But I think that's a guy who could be primed to be a really, really high level player by the time the season comes to an end, because he's going to see a lot more playing time, or at least he could.
Yeah, I'm a gigantic Josh Conerly fan. I try not to play favorites with certain players, but certain players become immediately fan favorites for me. And I've grown pretty close with his dad. And dude, man, I'm telling you, Conerly is ready. He is such an athlete, super heavy handed, super smart, really, really, really calm, demeanored guy. Those are the guys that'll murder you. I mean, these are the guys in
Really?
you want the most calm demeanor dudes. They roll up to the offensive line, set, hike, and it is on. And he's the type of guy who can just really, really play the game. And, I don't know exactly how Lee Terry's going to run with, we've had a couple different styles of offensive line coach theories, right? Can you play every position on the line? Can you be really flexible, or do you just stick in one position? It's going to be interesting to see what Coach Terry brings to that. But Coach Kavanaugh is also coming in as an offensive line coach as well, with a tremendous amount of experience, like one of the most old school guys out there right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. First-year head coach mixed with Coach Kavanaugh, a guy who's been in the game for over 30 years. And, I do like this offensive line. I think Conerly has a real good opportunity to start next year. I do think with Clem, he was in the rotation of going to be one of those guys who's going to be on the next level to start next year, or to at least be projected in that position. But I also think that the transfers who've come in are going to also make a difference on this offensive line. I don't know exactly how much this offensive line this year, early on especially, is going to get just continuous reps at one position. I think there might be some movement in there to try to figure out which lineup they like best. I do feel like it's kind of a 6 play, 5 can play, 6 people can play 5 positions. And I think there's a real good solid front up there. It's just it depends on kind of who fits where at this point. But I do think that Conerly is a fantastic pick and an absolutely phenomenal dude.
Yeah, fascinating to watch how this position group kind of shuffles out or shuffles around during spring football, because it's a blank canvas. And, my projection when I looked at the offensive line coming into spring football was probably have JPJ at center, Conerly left tackle, Anglau right guard, Jones left, and then Johnny Cornelius at right tackle. But there have been
not mad at that.
There have been some indications that it might be shuffled around in a different way than that. And so, when the spring game rolls around, that is something I'm going to be laser focused on, is who is playing where on the offensive line.
And there are question marks, obviously coming off injury for Junior. And, I do think Marcus Harper was a phenomenal player last year.
He was
probably
really
will be
good.
Playing a lot of football, kind of like when we had Brady Aiello, and he was that 6th man.
Mm-hmm.
And found a way in at guard, found a way in at tackle. Yeah, it could be a situation there. They might also just move guys around to give guys breather a little bit. You have a little bit of breathing room with this offensive line. The way it sits right now, there's a lot of guys in that room that can play. I do like that lineup, and I do think that that's going to be pretty much solid. And I actually, to go to my next guy, if you want to just jump right into it, is Jackson Powers Johnson. I think that you have to have the center, and you have to have the future of what your offensive line is going to be. I absolutely love this dude. Another guy who I've become very close friends with his dad. An absolute stud. Both these guys' dads, and I think that's a kind of a common theme with Oregon. And it is actually, it's a pretty common thing across most college sports. Most of these kids are really getting after it. They have supportive families. They have other people, even if it's not complete families wherever they're coming from. They have people in their corner supporting them, right? And it's great to kind of build relationships with some of these guys. And, you kind of get to see where the apple comes from, right? We always said, the old school teacher told me, apple trees make apples, man. And so it's like when you see these guys, it's really, you can get kind of insight into their psyche a little bit. I'm a dad as well, right? We're all kind of in that same age right now. And Jackson Powers Johnson is just all business all the time. Every time I've met him, he's a completely towering human being. Absolutely towering human being. I sit at 6'2", 250. I'm usually the biggest guy in the room when I walk into it. He is huge. And he is one of these dudes who's pure meat hands. When he shakes your hands, it is like you're shaking hands with a loaf of bread. And this guy is big. And he is all business and all about football. And he has played both sides of the ball. and played very early and played as a freshman. Played in a position with a great offensive line that he jumped into as a freshman and just like clockwork. This is a guy who I think is a tremendous situation. Alex Forsyth held down the line for a long time, and he's the next guy. I think the baton gets handed to Jackson. I think he'll be doing an absolute great job.
Yeah, and he's already been a really good offensive lineman too.
Right.
I mean, PFF grades him really high at that guard position, and when you watch him, man, nobody moves him around. I've never seen Jackson Powers Johnson get moved around on the offensive line. Like at worst, it's a stall. That's like the best defensive linemen have really gotten with him, whether you're talking run blocking or especially pass blocking.
Yeah.
From what I've seen from him, he just stands there. Guys try and go at him, and he's just nope. You're not getting my quarterback today. And he would also, if he is the starting center, he would need to make that leap, right? Because that's
Absolutely.
a lot of added responsibility. Alex Forsyth, he was so good for so long. I think we got kind of spoiled by him. He would, I'm pretty sure this last year, call audibles. He would turn back to Bo, and he had the freedom in that offense to be able to go to Bo and say, hey, they're showing this. We got to do that. Okay, sitting there at guard and listening to the audible is one thing. Reading the defense, calling it out, and having the wherewithal and confidence to do so and the trust of your teammates to do so, completely different thing.
And one of the guys I think who also made a huge difference in that is Ryan Walk, who is my personal favorite, one of my favorite Ducks of all time. I mean, this guy goes on the short list for me personally, but he's a guy who also filled in for Alex at center and from the guard position did really well. I think that the way that the line works is you have to have some new guys come in and you have to have some veterans at all times. It gets dicey when you have one unit grow together. It's great, but as soon as they're out, major question marks. And that's happened to Oregon a couple times. So it's cool to kind of see right now where you have a natural ebb and flow where a couple guys have left, bring the new guys up. Some guys have stayed. There's some continuity. Bringing back, I think also the coach is a big play. I think, having Alik Terry in the building was a real important deal. I went to the pro day. I talked with Penei Sewell. I talked with his family. Talked with Gabe Sewell for freaking like an hour. Like his dad. Like literally,
I'm talking about everybody. Ryan just finds people.
Okay, anybody, but you know how this goes. What were we talking about? Golf. So he's addicted to golf as well. So it's like. So when we're talking about though, as soon as I talked about with Coach Terry, and I talked with Coach Terry too as well, but as soon as we talked about it from the other perspective, other coaches, they were like, "Oh yeah, that's an automatic. That's an automatic," and it also keeps in line a little bit of pipeline to Hawaii as well. So I tend to think that everything's good on the offensive line. It's where you butter your bread, and you have to have it as an offensive mindset. You have to have your offensive line locked in so you can focus on everything else. And I think the Ducks have that this year.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to our final picks, and then we'll talk a little bit hoops because you were at the Nike Hoops Summit. And I want your thoughts on Jackson Shelstad there. So my third pick here for the most improved player by the end of 2023, I'm going back to the defensive side of the ball here, and this is a guy, Ryan, who has flashed some great potential. Looked like he was lost at times in the defensive scheme in 2022, and just wasn't quite sure of his assignments, wasn't always confident in his coverage abilities, and was, a little soft as a result or was out of position. Just never looked like he quite fit in, but same DC, same head coach, same position coach. I look at all that and say, boy, I really feel like this guy could take a leap because, in his 2 seasons, he's had some really, really excellent moments. He was also undergoing a position change a little bit because he was recruited as a safety, got moved down to linebacker, really struggled against the run. I think man-to-man coverage, he was, really good. And zone coverage, he was not as good, and his awareness needs to improve on that front. But you give him an offseason to look at film. You give him an offseason to, work with his coaches and all that sort of stuff. And if you know who I'm talking about by now, congratulations. You too have figured out that their answer, my third kind of pick to click for improvement here, is Jeffrey Bassa. Because the thing with him, Ryan, is he was recruited as a safety, makes the switch down to linebacker. When he makes a play, some guys, Brian Addison has this quality too. Absolutely. Some guys, when they make plays, it flashes different on your screen because and Dante Manning is in this category as well. They make these plays and you go, boy, that doesn't look like everybody else. And Jeffrey Boss's, impact plays have been more fleeting than I would like them to be at this point. But I wonder if a second year in there couldn't result in a jump. He's got a new number. He's wearing number 2 instead of 33. Maybe that's what he needs, just a vibe change there. I think that's a guy who is going to be able to see the field because in a 4-2-5, I think they'll probably have one bigger linebacker, one smaller linebacker. Justin Jacobs will be one. Keith Brown will be a big one. But then you could have Jeff Bossa. You could have Devin Jackson. You could have Connor Soley over there. I think Bossa's a guy I'm doubling down on him. I liked him going into last year. He struggled mightily. But when he makes plays like that sack in the Holiday Bowl, where North Carolina like half blew the protection, but he just swims the guy, goes and sacks Drake May, who didn't have a chance to get away from him. I'm like, that's the guy right there that I want to see.
And it feels like he fits the mold of maybe what you think Lanning wants out of his linebackers too. He's a great guy.
Rangy.
Yeah, and sideline to sideline too, right? You got the speed, in a lot of different places. I got a chance to talk with him just the other night. The Ducks Rising, another one. The NIL, this is like the NIL collective, the Ducks Rising. They asked me to do like a host with him, like do an interview thing, where I kind of like host the Twitter spaces that they hosted or whatever with him.
Yeah.
It was that for like an hour and we did the whole thing, talked about all that sort of stuff. And great dude. Number 2 was his high school jersey. Great player, but just super athletic, and he's developed into the football player he is now. And I remember when he moved to safety on my channel, we were talking constantly about like, this is such a great move because it strengthens the defense. And maybe when he goes back to safety, he'll, take with him other sort of stuff about knowledge about the linebacker. I said, he's not going to safety. He's making this move to make this move. And, Jamal Hill's in the same boat right now. I mean, he's now taking reps at linebacker as well. So, and Jeff talked about that, like his kind of helping out with Jamal a little bit on that same level. You have to be a special athlete to do that. There's only a certain guys that could do that. And, you talked about Brian Addison, and I think, God, he just such a great athlete, and such a rangy guy. These are the guys you need to make plays. When they make plays, it looks like a highlight reel.
Right.
But Jeff Bossa is just all business, great guy, super, super smart guy. He was the athlete, a best athlete. He
seems like a football junkie to me.
Football junkie. Wants what's best for the team. He's going to do what's best for the team, but also, think about it from his perspective. When he made that move, he said that's what the team needed. And he said they asked him to make that move, that linebacker. And he said he felt incredibly comfortable in it right away, coming into a room with Noah and Justin. Those guys obviously probably helped out a little bit for his training a little bit, but you're right. Justin Jacobs comes in. I think he's going to be getting a lot of rep. And then the guy who I think you're talking about, the next player, is Keith Brown. I think Keith Brown is a guy who's going to have a huge pick this year. Yeah, because he's a guy who's played a lot of football. He's in the same class as Jeff Bossa. Him and Jeff came in together, and they both have kind of come to grips with it. They're the middle linebacker core. There's other guys who are going to come in. The other 2 transfers are going to come in. They're going to definitely play, and the young guys are coming up. But I think those 2 guys have proven the fact that they can stay on the field and make plays, and they can support the run and they can support the pass. So I just think that this is such a crucial year for Dan Lanning this year, and these linebackers need to play so much better this year to prove that there's a lot of pressure on those 2 guys.
Totally agree. And the thing with Keith Brown too is he played in 2021 more than I think people remembered.
Sure.
So I think the biggest thing with him and why I lean towards Bossa is because I don't know. I mean, maybe they will, right? Maybe it'll depend on the situation. I don't know if they'll do 2 big linebackers at a time, Justin Jacobs and Keith Brown. My guess would be you'd have kind of Jacobs and Brown, on the depth chart at one slot, and then Hill, Bossa, Sully at, maybe Devin Jackson gets in there at the other slot. But I tell you, and the thing for Keith Brown is it more than just one game? Because that Holiday Bowl, dude, he was awesome. He wasn't good. He was awesome. I mean, he was a great tackler. He was a great blitzer. He knew where he was supposed to be. Like he did a lot of things well. I want to wrap up because we got a few minutes left here, Ryan. You were at the Nike Hoop Summit, and I've talked about on the last couple of episodes here, Locked on Ducks, the hype train for Jackson Shelstad. It was already kind of there with high volume scoring point guard from Westland High School. We all went, oh my gosh, second coming of Peyton Pritchard, which would be awesome. You saw him live. I've just kind of seen little snippets of his game, but the hype train keeps growing. An NBA scout was giving him praise. What have you seen from Shelstad? What's Oregon getting in this guy?
A traditional point guard. And I think that's what they've missed, So if you want to just chat basketball for a little bit, right? I think Dana Altman's always had the traditional point guard. He loves a big team, but he doesn't like everybody to be 6'10". He likes there to be a traditional point guard. And the traditional point guard is usually 6 foot, 6'2", somewhere in that range, is quick enough to be able to get through, penetrate through the defense, get you a bucket when you need to, maybe at the end of the shot clock, get people involved, really good defense up front, be able to put pressure on, be able to run the floor, sideline to sideline, all these kind of things that Will Richardson was not. And, you have not had that for a little bit in time at Oregon because you've had some big point guards. You got these 6'5" point guards. It's a very different situation, So Jackson Shelstad, one from local area. The guy who my school, that I teach at, the head coach of our basketball team, his son is the best athlete in our school. He's a D1 athlete. He's going to go to Gonzaga for track. But he grew up playing with Jackson, same basketball team. They've known each other since elementary school, middle school. Grew up in the same kind of area. The guy who I work with also is friends with Terry Pritchard as well. So the whole Pritchard family, everything else through Westland, right? Then on the other side, I know a guy named Robert Key. Robert Key is the coach of Westland right now this year, who was the coach at Grant before that. But in my day, he was from Cleveland, where I coached, and I worked with them 20, 30 years ago. I've known Robert now and it's just amazing. I saw him at the Hoop Summit last night, and I'm going to see if I can try to get him on Sports Jax. I think he would actually give a lot of insight to Jackson's play this year because they had a great year. But classic example, he coaches golf as well. So as soon as we start talking, immediately we just start talking golf.
Yeah.
Like anything. The thing that brings us together is basketball, but we just start talking golf. So, but what he said about Jackson is the key thing about a point guard in my mind is you make everybody else better. So does he make everybody else better? He is the star for sure. He is an absolute star. He's an absolute jumper, quick dribble. His game is more like Kyrie Irving than probably anything. If I was to give a comp,
hopefully his personality isn't.
No, God, no. But ball on a string type of point guard. So guy who has real quick handles. And his thing is that kind of like the DeAnthony Thomas thing, where DeAnthony said that when he cut at full speed, and he learned to kind of like as he cut at full speed. Jackson can move with the ball at full speed, which again just makes him feel faster on the court. When he got to play with, I like to see him against real talent as much as possible. So obviously, Les Schwab Invitational, he did great. They won that thing. Then and they beat the number one team in the country. They beat Bronny's team. Then, with this one, you get to see him against the world competition, but you get to see him also play up against the other USA guys. And just was really great. Came in immediately, made plays, got steals. I had a great little snippet of on my video of the little 7-point action that happened where he got the steal, he got the layup or shot. Bronny got the layup, and then he kicked it out for the 3, and he got the 3. And it was just such an exciting moment. I was like, oh my God. When was the last time we had that at Matt Court, or Matt Knight, It's like immediately we were thinking as Ducks, like, how could this portray into something bigger? I do think Bronny probably goes to USC, and it is what it is. But I do think that Jackson Shelstad is one of those guys who is just a major difference maker. And the two guys that he's coming in with, if they're able to stick it around and maybe generate a little bit of buzz for a year or two, I think they could really benefit themselves in the draft. I think the NIL maybe hasn't really impacted the basketball as much as it's impacted the football in keeping guys around, but I think it has the potential to. And this is a situation where, you said NBA scouts are already taking a look at these guys in high school, and they're projecting very nicely. So I think they're going to continue to grow. The bigger thing is, this is the thing I talked about with these guys in Vegas, these coaches I talked with. They need gym rats. They need guys they want to kick out of the gym. This team has not been that team. These are the guys who've kind of rolled into practice, roll the ball out, thinking everything is good, put the sweats on, get out of there. You need guys like Peyton Pritchard who are up all night. The cool thing about Jackson Shelstad is this guy knows how to work. During his whole upbringing, he looked at Peyton Pritchard. He has a great relationship with Peyton. He's seen that from the firsthand. And then when COVID happened, he was with Steve Blake the whole time. and working with Steve Blake, like one-on-one, playing basketball one-on-one. And
Legend.
he calls Steve Blake Yoda. He's like, dude, and he is. I mean, if you go back to Steve Blake in college, one of the greatest college basketball teams of all time that he played on. So he's just an absolute G when it comes to his knowledge. So Jackson's had a little bit of an upbringing that gets you excited if you're a Duck fan of this could be the real one. It's almost like The Last Jedi. This could be like the real one, man.
Well, we certainly need him to, because Oregon has. Well, we don't have to go into all their struggles the last couple of years. We never struggle when Rian Winter's here. He's Sports Chat 503 on YouTube and Twitter. Ryan, you're the man. As always, good to talk to you.
Thank you so much, man. Good luck in the golf game.
Yeah, I need it. Rough round the other day. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.